Hey, good looking. Welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me. And if you're new here, I've got Skittles in my mouth. Let me finish them. Today, I thought I would go over some Sydney Grace single eyeshadow comps for the brand new Artist Couture Bronze, Supreme Bronze palette. So if you're interested in the single eyeshadows that I used for that selection, then just make sure you stay tuned. I'm Kendra Morgan Official. I put out content weekly centered around single eyeshadows, makeup brushes that aren't Morphe, and sunscreen. So if you like that kind of content, make sure you subscribe to my channel. Today here I've got featured for you guys some shadows that I put together to make a comparable palette to the Artist Couture Supreme Bronze. I just want to go over a couple of things really quickly. I'm duping the vibes of this shadow palette, this brand new eyeshadow palette, with shadows from my single collection that already exist, and you can buy them as single eyeshadows. I want to really quickly go over how I go about duping these shades, or these palettes really. And that is that I look out for standout shadows within a particular palette. For example, the top shade here, Mirage, and that's not a standout shadow to me. Neither is the shade Toasty or Baked, if you will. Those are all just light, medium, and mid to dark tones of browns. So I feel like everybody has those in palettes that already exist, or they already have those in singles that already exist. So I take the palettes and I look at it, break it down into what is the most eye-catching, and then I go and find shadows for those eye-catching shades, and then kind of center around that the remaining shadows. And I will use brands that I haven't featured in a while or I haven't used in a while to just kind of rotate around my selection or collection. That is what I do. For this particular palette, I felt like the two shadows that really stuck out are Sunkissed and Soleil. And those are actually the only two shadows that I didn't use Sydney Grace. I used a Makeup Geek and I used a Devinah shadow. But don't worry, I will give you guys comparable eyeshadows that you could purchase. I know Sydney Grace is probably getting ready to launch their Christmas in July sale, so this will be a comparable section. Also, stay tuned for the end. I do want to make a final remark about this eyeshadow palette because I did pick up on some vibes here, and I made some notes and found that many of these shadows are in a comp palette that's already existing. So stay tuned for all of that. Let's go ahead and get started with the swatches. We're starting out with Summer Magic by Sydney Grace. Actually, all these are Sydney Grace unless I say so. This, again, just like a matte creamy beige pink shade. I built it up a little bit here so you guys can see on the swatch. I'm adding a little bit more shadow to the arm swatch just to kind of build it up and give you guys a good look at the shadow. Tippy Taupe is going to be the shade that I used in place of Taupeless in the Artist Couture palette. It's beautiful. I love this shadow. It appears in another comp palette, which I'll go over in a little bit, and it's just a really good medium mid-tone brown. Next, Tiara is what I use in place of Glisten, and this is actually a silvery taupey duochrome. So I thought that was really, really gorgeous, and that is one swipe, folks. Look at the sheen on that. That is so gorgeous, and that is present all across the board for all of Sydney Grace shadows. That's just how the shimmers work. And then Midnight is just a matte black shadow that I use in place of Shady for the Artist Couture. I don't really feel like there's anything spectacular about this or black, excuse me. I feel like you could use any black that you have in your collection to make your comp palette, and it would just be beautiful. It's a nice deep darkening shade, so not too much to say to that. Then Turtle Doves is the shade on the second row that I put in place of the Artist Couture Supreme Bronze, the shade Sand. Again, very high luster, a nice beautiful sheen, shimmery shine, kind of that pink then blushed the shade next to it, which comps HBIC or Head Bean Dip in Charge, and you can put in whatever bean name you'd like, but I'm just gonna keep it PG on my channel like always. And this one's a little bit more coppery in my opinion. It's a little bit more bronzy coppery, and I thought that its sheen and shimmer still withstand everything. Aztec Ruins is the shade that I used in place of Gilded from the Artist Couture palette, and I felt like this was a really, really like super orangey burnt shade that would go really, really well with the Sun-Kissed shadow if you wanted to use that and just get like a really, really orange look. Then Desert Sun is the shade that I put in my comp palette for Tantalize. I felt like that was just super, super gorgeous. Oh, it's like a reddish copper shade. This one isn't as high of a luster because I think it has more pigment in it than it does like the shimmer. But nonetheless, very creamy, very beautiful. Makeup Geek Dynamic is what I ended up putting in place of Sun-Kissed. And I couldn't decide between that or one of my Glam Shop shadows, but I feel like this had the fiery orange, but it still had that medium depth that was in the Artist Couture palette. So I was really appreciative of that shade, actually. And I'm just building up the swatch here. Makeup Geeks are a little bit more on the buildable side. They are good on their own on the first dip, but they do really intensify nicely when they're built up. And if you wanted to put in place a Sydney Grace shadow, use Sunset. Then Caramel is what I use in place of Toasty. And I don't feel like that is come by surprise that those are the types of shades that you would see names for. This one actually looks a little bit taupey, but it has more of a reddish taupe shade to it. I find it really, really beautiful. It's what I have in the crease of my eye today for my look. So Devinah's Vela is what I use for that like beautiful sunny golden yellow shade in the Artist Couture palette. Its name is Soleil. Soleil. And this is actually boasted as a duo or a multi-chrome, but I'm trying to give you guys the shimmer here, and I'm just not quite able to achieve it. I think I got a little too much lighting going on there. But nonetheless, it's a beautiful yellow. Even with the bend, it's kind of hard to see with that much light on. But you get the drift. It's beautiful. I love it. If I build it up, it really gives like this lemon golden yellow, and I feel like that really is comparable to what is attractive in the Artist Couture Supreme Bronze palette. Lastly, oh wait, excuse me, that would be the comp shade right there by Sydney Grace, and that's Mermaid. I actually have this one. I didn't feel like it fit it quite as good because it is also a duochrome and it kind of gives that green sheen. And I didn't feel like that really fit the vibe of the Artist Couture palette, but it's beautiful. Dark Chocolate is the last shade in the palette that I use to be comparable to Baked. So there you have it. Those are the shades. How did I do on duping the vibes of the Artist Couture Supreme Bronze Eyeshadow Palette? Let me know in the comments down below what you guys think. And here's just another view of how excellent and beautiful some of these shadows really, really, truly are. Okay, so there you have the swatches of the comparable palette that I made. I used all Sydney Grace shadows except for the two standout shadows. And for those, I used that Makeup Geek shadow and Devinah's Vela, excuse me. But if you were wanting to stay within the confines of Sydney Grace, like say you were purchasing from their Christmas in July sale or getting them on sale, you could go with Mermaid in place of Vela and Sunset in place of Sun-Kissed for the Artist Couture palette. And it would be Dynamic from Makeup Geek that I ended up choosing. Okay, if you're finding value in this content, make sure you subscribe to my channel. And one last thing that I do want to make a remark on, in this palette, I noticed that I used a lot of the shades that I first purchased from Sydney Grace. And if you don't already know, I'll go ahead and link that in the eye and down below. But my first batch of Sydney Grace shadows that I ever purchased were the Natasha Denona Biba palette comp shades. And so I think if you had the Natasha Denona Biba palette, you would probably be able to make quite a few comparable looks, minus maybe that really golden red shade or that burnt red shade. Of course, I think Biba has one of those. And then also the yellow shadow. You would probably want to purchase maybe like Mermaid if you were into that green shifty duochrome-ness, or maybe another shadow from Sydney Grace that is nice and bright and yellow, like their lemonade shade. You might go for something like that. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you give it a thumbs up on the way out. I can't wait to see you guys in my next video. Bye.